Most gardeners think they missed their chance. They look at the calendar, see July staring back at them, and assume the planting season is over. They tell themselves they'll wait until next spring. They'll wait for cooler weather. They'll wait for the right time. And while they're waiting, something remarkable is happening underground. The soil is warm. Not just warm, perfectly warm. Every day the sun heats the earth, creating conditions that encourage roots to grow quickly, spread aggressively, and establish faster than many gardeners realize. While everyone else is assuming the season is finished, smart gardeners are quietly planting perennials that will spend the rest of summer building strong root systems and preparing to explode with growth next year. That is why some yards seem to get fuller every season without their owners constantly buying new plants. Those gardeners understand something important. A lush landscape isn't created by planting more plants. It's created by planting the right plants. The kinds of perennials that spread naturally. The kinds that fill bare spaces. The kinds that multiply while you're sitting on the porch enjoying your morning coffee. The kinds that come back every year and return larger than they were before. Today, we're looking at 11 fast-spreading perennials that thrive when planted in July. These are plants that create dense drifts of color, suppress weeds, attract pollinators, and turn empty spaces into a landscape that looks established, mature, and alive. And before we get started, I have a major announcement. The gardening guide you've been writing to me about for months is finally here. The Plant Once Garden is officially out. You have been incredibly patient while I took the time to get this right. It is approximately 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, gathered into one complete reference, designed with a hand-drawn heritage cover and warm cream pages that feel like a guide your grandmother would have owned. Inside, you'll find the 90 perennial plants that come back every year with almost no labor, 6 complete garden plans, the no-labor planting calendar, and the hydrogen peroxide method explained completely. I've also included the specific perennials that bring hummingbirds singing and dancing right outside your window, the chapter on what your garden becomes over 20 years, and the mistakes that kill perennials. This is a reference you can lean on for the rest of your gardening life. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the pinned comment or description below to get your copy. Thank you again for your patience. Now, back to the garden. Plant 1. Catmint, Nepeta times Phloxenii. If you've ever driven past a garden and wondered why it looked soft, flowing, and professionally designed, there is a very good chance catmint was involved. This plant has a way of making everything around it look better. Nepeta times Phloxenii is hardy in USDA zones 4 through 8 and is one of the fastest-growing, most dependable perennials you can plant in midsummer. Within a surprisingly short period of time, it forms broad mounds of silvery gray foliage covered in lavender blue flowers that seem to glow in the afternoon sun. What makes catmint special isn't just its beauty, it's what happens after it blooms. Most flowering plants give you one performance and then spend the rest of the season looking tired. Catmint is different. Once the first flush of flowers begins to fade, simply shear the plant back by about 1/3. Within weeks, it responds with fresh foliage and a second wave of blooms, 2 displays for the price of 1. And while you're enjoying those flowers, deer are usually looking elsewhere. The aromatic foliage contains oils that most browsing animals prefer to avoid. Gardeners who struggle with deer pressure often discover that catmint becomes one of the most reliable plants in the entire landscape. The spreading habit is equally impressive. Over time, individual plants widen into dense clumps that soften pathways, spill over retaining walls, and fill empty gaps between larger shrubs and perennials. Picture a border lined with clouds of lavender blue flowers, gently moving in the breeze, while bees work every bloom from morning until evening. That is the effect catmint creates, and once established, it asks for remarkably little in return. Full sun, decent drainage, and occasional trimming are usually all it needs to perform beautifully year after year. Plant 2. Bee Balm, Monarda. If you want a perennial that turns your garden into a wildlife destination, bee balm belongs near the very top of your list. The first time a hummingbird hovers inches from one of its flowers, you'll understand why gardeners become so attached to this plant. Monarda is hardy across much of the United States and spreads steadily through underground rhizomes, creating larger and larger colonies every season. By the third year, a single planting can become an impressive drift of color. The flowers look almost exotic. Brilliant red, rich pink, deep purple. Each bloom resembles a tiny crown exploding outward in every direction. But the real magic isn't what you see. It's what arrives. Hummingbirds, butterflies, native bees, bumblebees. Pollinators seem incapable of ignoring bee balm when it comes into flower. And unlike many ornamental plants, bee balm contributes more than visual beauty. The foliage carries a pleasant, mint-like fragrance because Monarda belongs to the mint family. Brush against it while walking through the garden and you'll immediately notice the scent. Many gardeners are surprised to learn the leaves can even be used for herbal teas. That's not something most flowering perennials can claim. For best results, plant bee balm where it receives plenty of sun and adequate airflow. Modern mildew-resistant varieties, such as Jacob Klein and the Sugar Buzz series, perform exceptionally well, while retaining all the pollinator benefits that made this plant famous. Imagine sitting on your patio in late summer while butterflies drift from bloom to bloom and hummingbirds dart through the garden like tiny flying jewels. That experience starts with plants like bee balm. Plant 3. Foamflower, Tiarella. Every gardener has that difficult spot. The place under mature trees. The corner that never seems to receive enough sunlight. The area where grass refuses to grow and most flowers slowly disappear. Foamflower was made for those spaces. Tiarella spreads through runners called stolons, gradually weaving itself into a dense carpet of attractive foliage that transforms bare ground into something lush and intentional. Hardy and dependable, it thrives in part shade and even full shade, making it one of the most useful spreading perennials for woodland gardens. In spring, delicate flower spikes rise above the foliage, like frothy clouds floating over the ground. The blooms may be white, pale pink, or blush-colored depending on the variety, and they create a surprisingly elegant display in areas where color is often difficult to achieve. But the flowers are only part of the story. The foliage carries the landscape through the rest of the year. Many varieties feature deeply lobed leaves marked with dark centers, creating visual interest long after flowering has finished. Then autumn arrives. As temperatures cool, the foliage often shifts into rich shades of bronze, burgundy, and red, extending the season of interest even further. In many gardens, those colorful leaves persist well into winter. What makes foamflower especially valuable is its ability to solve multiple problems at once. It covers soil, suppresses weeds, helps reduce erosion, and fills awkward shaded spaces that otherwise require constant maintenance. Instead of fighting those difficult conditions, foamflower works with them. Plant it once, give it time to spread, and watch a forgotten corner of the garden become one of your favorite places. Plant 4. Black-Eyed Susan, Rudbeckia. There is a reason Black-Eyed Susan appears in gardens all across America. Few perennials combine toughness, beauty, and spreading power quite like this one. Rudbeckia is the kind of plant that keeps performing when summer becomes hot, dry, and exhausting. While other flowers begin to fade, Black-Eyed Susan often looks like it is just getting started. Its bright golden petals surrounding dark chocolate-colored centers create a combination that is impossible to miss from across the yard. Entire drifts of Black-Eyed Susans seem to glow in late afternoon sunlight, and those drifts arrive surprisingly quickly. The plant spreads through both rhizomes and seed, gradually creating larger colonies every season. What begins as a small planting can eventually become a sweeping display that fills substantial portions of a border. That natural expansion is one reason landscape designers value it so highly. The bloom season is another. Many varieties flower continuously from midsummer deep into autumn, providing reliable color exactly when many gardens need it most. But perhaps the most overlooked feature appears after flowering. Most gardeners focus on the petals. Birds focus on the seed heads. Leave those dark cones standing through autumn and winter, and you'll often find goldfinches and other songbirds visiting your garden to feed. The result is a landscape that remains interesting even after frost arrives. For gardeners dealing with clay soil, heat, drought, or inconsistent rainfall, Black-Eyed Susan is often one of the safest investments they can make. It doesn't demand perfection. It simply grows and keeps coming back stronger. Tell me in the comments, which of these first 4 plants would you most like to add to your garden this July? Because we're only getting started. The next plants on this list become even more impressive once they begin spreading through the landscape. Plant 5. Cranesbill hardy geranium, Geranium macrorhizum/Geranium himalayense. Most gardeners know exactly what a geranium looks like, or at least they think they do. The bright annual geraniums sold every spring in garden centers have convinced millions of gardeners that geraniums are temporary plants that need replacing year after year. Hardy cranesbill geraniums are something entirely different. These are true perennials. They return every year, spread steadily, and form dense, weed-suppressing carpets that solve landscaping problems while adding months of color. Once established, many varieties expand outward through rhizomes, gradually creating a thick mat of attractive foliage that leaves very little room for weeds to invade. That alone makes them valuable. But the flowers are what first capture people's attention. Soft pinks, rich violets, cool blues, delicate blooms that seem to float above the foliage for weeks at a time. And unlike many flowering perennials that demand constant attention, hardy geraniums remain attractive long after flowering ends. The foliage often becomes the star of the show. Many varieties release a pleasant fragrance when brushed against, while others develop spectacular autumn color as temperatures begin to cool. Shades of bronze, orange, crimson, and deep red can transform entire sections of the garden. What truly separates cranesbill from many other spreading perennials is its adaptability. Dry shade, partial shade, difficult slopes, areas beneath mature shrubs, places where many plants struggle. Hardy geranium simply keeps growing. Imagine walking through your garden in October and seeing a ground cover that is still colorful, still healthy, and still filling space, while everything around it is beginning to fade. That is why experienced gardeners plant cranesbill once and rarely garden without it again. Plant 6. Garden phlox, Phlox paniculata. There is one plant on this list that many people smell before they see. On a warm summer evening, you may be sitting outside enjoying the last light of the day when a sweet fragrance drifts through the air. You look around, and there it is, garden phlox, towering above the surrounding plants with huge clusters of flowers that seem to glow against the summer landscape. Phlox paniculata has earned its reputation as one of the classic plants of the American perennial border for a very simple reason. It delivers impact, big impact, large flower clusters, bold color, strong fragrance, and impressive height, all in a single plant. July planting gives garden phlox plenty of warm soil to begin establishing roots, while the rest of the growing season remains ahead. Once established, these plants quickly develop into substantial clumps that add structure and fullness to borders. The flowers arrive in shades of pink, purple, lavender, white, and deep rose. Many varieties produce blooms for weeks, creating large masses of color that can be seen from across the yard. But fragrance is where phlox becomes truly special. Unlike many modern flowers bred primarily for appearance, garden phlox still possesses the sweet perfume that made it a favorite in traditional cottage gardens. That scent attracts pollinators throughout the season, while creating an entirely different sensory experience for gardeners. Instead of simply looking at your landscape, you're experiencing it. For best results, choose mildew-resistant varieties such as David, Gina, or Robert Poor. These modern selections maintain all the beauty of traditional phlox while dramatically reducing disease problems. And when several mature clumps begin flowering together, the result looks less like a flower bed and more like a summer celebration. Before we continue, if your goal is to build a garden that gets fuller every year instead of forcing you to start over every spring, don't forget that my complete reference guide, The Plant Once Garden, is now officially available. It's approximately 150 pages, covering the perennial foundations, permanent planting strategies, garden layouts, low-maintenance systems, and long-term planning principles we talk about on this channel. Everything is organized into one easy-to-follow reference, designed to help you build a garden that improves year after year. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now, or use the link in the pinned comment below to get your copy. Now let's get back to the plants. Plant 7. Russian sage, Salvia yangi. Some plants survive difficult conditions. Russian sage seems to enjoy them. If you have a section of your property that bakes in the afternoon sun, dries out quickly, and causes other plants to struggle, Russian sage may become your new favorite perennial. This plant thrives where many others surrender. Salvia yangii produces a cloud-like display of lavender-blue flowers carried on silvery stems that create movement throughout the landscape. Even a light breeze brings the entire plant to life. That movement adds a softness that many gardens lack. Instead of appearing rigid or static, the planting feels dynamic and natural. Russian sage establishes surprisingly quickly in warm summer soil and eventually forms large, impressive clumps capable of filling significant space. The combination of silvery foliage and blue flowers creates a cooling visual effect during the hottest months of the year. When temperatures soar, Russian sage somehow manages to look fresh. The plant is also remarkably drought-tolerant once established. In fact, overly rich soil often produces weaker growth than lean, well-drained conditions. Poor soil, dry soil, rocky soil. Russian sage frequently performs best where other perennials complain. And the show doesn't end when flowering stops. Throughout autumn and winter, the woody framework remains standing, providing texture and structure long after many herbaceous perennials have disappeared. A mature drift of Russian sage catching the golden light of late afternoon is one of the most beautiful sights in a summer garden. It creates the kind of landscape moment that makes people slow down while walking past your home. Plant 8. Creeping thyme, Thymus serpillum. Most people see an empty patch of ground and immediately think about mulch. Creeping thyme offers a far more beautiful solution. This fast-spreading perennial creates a dense, low-growing carpet that gradually fills spaces many gardeners struggle to maintain. Between stepping stones, along pathways, on dry slopes, at the edges of borders, anywhere the goal is coverage rather than height, creeping thyme excels. As it spreads, it forms a tightly woven mat of tiny evergreen leaves that suppress weeds and create year-round structure. Then summer arrives. Suddenly, the entire carpet erupts into bloom. Thousands of small pink or purple flowers cover the foliage until the ground itself seems to have changed color. Pollinators absolutely love it. The flowers may be small, but bees find them irresistible. And every step across the plant releases a pleasant herbal fragrance into the air. That sensory experience is part of what makes creeping thyme so memorable. You're not simply looking at a ground cover, you're interacting with it. Unlike turf grass, creeping thyme requires very little maintenance once established. No weekly mowing, no constant fertilizing, no struggle to keep it green during hot weather. Instead, it quietly spreads outward year after year, creating a living carpet that looks increasingly established as time passes. For gardeners trying to replace difficult lawn areas or soften hardscape features, few plants offer more value. Imagine stepping across a stone pathway bordered by fragrant blooms, bees gently working the flowers, while the entire area remains green and attractive, even when summer heat arrives. That is what creeping thyme brings to a landscape. And we're not finished yet. The next 3 plants on this list are some of the fastest spreaders of all, capable of transforming large areas of the garden while providing color, pollinator support, and year-round interest. Plant 9, Yarrow, Achillea millefolium. Some plants need rich soil. Some plants need constant watering. Some plants seem determined to test your patience every step of the way. Yarrow is not one of them. In fact, Yarrow often performs best when you leave it alone. This tough, fast-spreading perennial has been thriving across North America for generations, quietly proving that beauty and toughness can absolutely exist in the same plant. Achillea millefolium spreads through underground rhizomes, gradually creating broad colonies of finely textured foliage that help fill empty spaces while suppressing weeds. Once established, those colonies become larger every season. The flowers rise above the foliage in broad, flat-topped clusters that seem to float over the garden. Yellow, white, pink, red, coral. Depending on the variety, Yarrow can fit almost any color scheme, and unlike many summer flowers that fade quickly, Yarrow continues performing through some of the hottest periods of the growing season. What many gardeners don't realize is that yarrow offers benefits far beyond appearance. Its flowers attract a remarkable collection of beneficial insects, hoverflies, lacewings, parasitic wasps, pollinators. These visitors help create a healthier garden ecosystem while reducing populations of common pests. In many ways, yarrow functions like a natural support system for the rest of your landscape. Another surprising advantage is its ability to tolerate poor soil. Rich soil often causes weaker growth. Poor soil frequently produces stronger plants. That means those difficult sections of your property that seem unsuitable for flowers may actually be ideal for yarrow. And once winter arrives, the dried flower heads remain standing, adding texture and structure long after the growing season ends. A mature drift of yarrow, planted in July, can eventually become one of the most dependable features in your landscape. Not because it demands attention, because it doesn't. Plant 10. Blanket flower, Gyardia. If your goal is non-stop color, blanket flower deserves serious attention. Few perennials bloom with the determination of Gyardia. While many plants produce one spectacular display and then begin slowing down, blanket flower simply keeps going, and going, and going. The flowers look like miniature sunsets scattered throughout the garden. Brilliant reds, golden yellows, orange blends, warm tones that seem designed specifically for summer. Each bloom brings energy to the landscape. When planted in groups, the effect becomes impossible to ignore. The reason blanket flower spreads so effectively is not just its growth habit, it's also its willingness to self-seed. A healthy planting often produces new plants naturally, gradually increasing the size of the display without requiring additional purchases. That means one July planting can continue expanding for years. And because the plant thrives in heat, drought, and poor soil, summer conditions rarely slow it down. In fact, some of the most impressive blanket flower displays occur in locations where many traditional garden plants struggle. Dry borders, sandy soil, hot microclimates, full sun exposures. These conditions often bring out the best in Gyardia. Pollinators appreciate it as well. Butterflies and bees visit continuously throughout the flowering season, creating movement and activity that make the garden feel alive. Perhaps the greatest compliment you can give blanket flower is this: it never looks like it's trying. While other plants battle through summer, blanket flower behaves as though summer was created specifically for it. Plant it once, give it sunshine, then stand back and enjoy months of color. Plant 11. Coneflower, Echinacea purpurea. If there is a perennial that perfectly represents the modern low-maintenance garden, it may be coneflower. Strong, reliable, beautiful, long-lived, and remarkably easy to grow. Echinacea has become a favorite across America because it delivers exactly what gardeners want: weeks of color, excellent drought tolerance, pollinator support, winter interest, and steady expansion over time. The flowers are instantly recognizable, large petals radiating outward from a raised central cone that gives the plant its name. Traditional varieties feature rich purple-pink blooms, but modern selections now offer white, orange, yellow, coral, and even deep red flowers. No matter the color, the structure remains striking, and that structure continues working long after the petals fade. Most gardeners focus on the flowers. Goldfinches focus on the seed heads. Leave those cones standing through autumn and winter, and you'll often be rewarded with birds feeding directly in the garden. That simple decision adds months of seasonal interest while supporting wildlife during the colder parts of the year. Coneflowers establish quickly in warm summer soil, developing deep root systems that help them tolerate future drought conditions. Once mature, they require surprisingly little care. The plants gradually increase in size while self-seeding lightly around the garden, creating natural-looking drifts that blend beautifully with other perennials. What makes coneflower especially valuable in a lush landscape is its architecture. Even among large plantings, the bold flowers remain visible. They provide vertical interest, strong silhouettes, and visual anchors that help tie an entire garden together. When planted alongside black-eyed Susan, catmint, bee balm, and yarrow, the result feels established, balanced, and full. Exactly the kind of landscape most gardeners hope to create. Now, before you rush outside and start planting, there is something important you need to understand. July planting is different from spring planting. The plants on this list are absolutely capable of establishing successfully during midsummer, but the way you plant them can determine whether they merely survive or truly thrive. Most gardening advice stops at telling you to water after planting. That isn't enough. To take full advantage of warm summer soil, you need to understand what is happening underground, how roots react to heat, and why some gardeners achieve extraordinary results while others struggle with the exact same plants. The next section may be the most valuable part of this entire video because it contains the July-specific strategies that dramatically increase your chances of success. Let's talk about the root shock secrets, watering science, and midsummer establishment techniques that experienced gardeners use when planting perennials during the hottest part of the season. If you've made it this far, you already know which plants can transform a landscape. Now let's talk about how to make sure they actually do it. Because the truth is, most perennial failures in July have very little to do with the plant itself. They happen because gardeners unknowingly force new plants into a stressful situation and then wonder why growth slows down. The good news is that a few simple adjustments can dramatically improve your success rate, and it all starts underground. Walk into a garden center in July and you'll notice something immediately. The biggest plants are usually the most tempting. They look mature. They look impressive. They already have flowers. They seem like the obvious choice. But midsummer planting changes the equation. Smaller plants often establish faster. A quart-sized perennial frequently adapts more successfully than a large, heavily developed specimen. The reason comes down to balance. A smaller plant has less foliage demanding water, while its roots are adjusting to a new environment. A larger plant must support far more leaves, stems, and flowers, while simultaneously trying to establish new roots. That extra demand creates additional stress. When planting in July, don't automatically reach for the biggest plant available. Sometimes the smaller one becomes the stronger plant a year later. This next tip feels wrong. Many gardeners struggle to do it, but experienced growers understand its value. If your newly purchased perennial is covered in flower buds, remove them before planting. Yes, even the beautiful ones. Especially the beautiful ones. Flowers require energy, lots of it. Every bloom represents resources the plant could otherwise direct toward root growth. When you remove flowers and buds before planting, you're telling the plant to focus entirely on establishing itself. The result is often a stronger root system, better drought resistance, and healthier long-term growth. You sacrifice a few weeks of flowers. In return, you gain years of better performance. That's a trade worth making. Before placing any perennial into the ground, take a close look at the roots. If they are circling around the outside of the root ball in a dense mass, the plant is root-bound. This is extremely common in midsummer nursery stock, and it is one of the most overlooked causes of planting failure. Many gardeners simply slide the plant into the hole exactly as it came from the pot. Unfortunately, roots often continue circling after planting. Instead of expanding outward into the surrounding soil, they remain trapped in their old pattern. The plant struggles. Growth slows. Water uptake becomes less efficient. Over time, the problem worsens. Before planting, gently loosen those roots with your fingers. If necessary, make a few shallow vertical cuts around the root ball. This encourages roots to grow outward into the surrounding soil where they belong. A few extra seconds during planting can make an enormous difference later. If there is one mistake that destroys more newly planted July perennials than almost anything else, it is shallow watering. Many gardeners worry about heat. They see the plant every day. They give it a quick drink every day, and unintentionally create a weak root system. Here's why. Roots grow toward moisture. If only the top inch of soil becomes wet, roots stay near the surface. That shallow root system becomes vulnerable to heat and drought. The first serious hot spell arrives, and suddenly the plant struggles. Instead, train the roots to go downward. Deep watering encourages deep roots, and deep roots create stronger plants. Before planting, fill the planting hole completely with water, then allow that water to drain. This simple step hydrates the surrounding soil before the plant ever enters the ground. Once the perennial is planted, the roots immediately encounter moisture beneath the surface instead of dry soil. That encourages downward growth from day one. It is one of the easiest improvements you can make to your planting process. Water the soil, not the plant. Another common mistake is watering the foliage. The leaves look thirsty, so gardeners spray the entire plant. Unfortunately, wet foliage during warm weather can encourage disease issues while doing very little to help the roots. The roots are what need water. Direct your watering at the soil surrounding the root ball. That is where it matters. Keep the water low. Keep the focus underground, and let the roots do the rest. One of the most expensive habits in gardening is guessing. Guessing leads to overwatering. Guessing leads to underwatering. Guessing creates problems. Instead, use a simple test. Push your finger approximately 2 inches into the soil near the root zone. If the soil feels dry, water deeply. If it feels moist, leave it alone. No guessing, no complicated equipment. Just a quick check that tells you what the plant actually needs. The healthiest gardens are often managed by gardeners who observe rather than assume. July planting can be extremely successful, but it does require respecting the reality of summer heat. The first week after planting is often the most important. This is when roots begin adjusting to their new environment. Anything you can do to reduce stress during this period pays enormous dividends later. Imagine moving into a new house during the hottest week of the year. That is essentially what a newly planted perennial experiences. If an intense heat wave is forecast immediately after planting, temporary shade can help tremendously. This does not need to be complicated. A lawn chair, a piece of cardboard attached to stakes, a section of shade cloth. Anything that blocks the harsh afternoon sun for several days can reduce stress while roots become established. Once the plant begins settling in, remove the protection and allow normal growth to continue. Most gardeners pay attention to air temperature. Roots care about soil temperature. Bare soil exposed to intense summer sun can become surprisingly hot. When soil temperatures climb too high, root growth slows dramatically. And slow root growth means slow establishment. This is where mulch becomes invaluable. A 2 to 3 inch layer of organic mulch acts like insulation. It helps retain moisture, moderates temperature swings, reduces evaporation, and creates a much more stable environment for developing roots. Just remember one important detail. Keep mulch slightly away from the stem or crown of the plant. You want to protect the roots, not smother the plant. Many gardeners assume fertilizer solves every problem. Newly planted perennials prove otherwise. Applying fertilizer immediately after planting often encourages rapid top growth. That sounds helpful. But the roots haven't caught up yet. The plant suddenly produces more leaves than the young root system can support. The result can be stress, wilting, and disappointing performance. Instead, allow the plant to focus on establishment, good soil, proper watering, mulch, patience. Those are the tools that matter most during the first few weeks. The fertilizer can wait. Strong roots come first. Everything else follows. This may surprise some people. July is not automatically a bad planting month. In many ways, it offers unique advantages. The soil is warm. Root activity is high. Perennials can establish quickly when moisture is managed correctly. The key is understanding that summer planting requires intention. Plant in the cooler part of the day. Water deeply. Protect roots. Mulch generously. Avoid unnecessary stress. Do those things consistently, and many of the perennials on today's list will reward you with years of growth, color, and expansion. And that's the real goal. Not just getting a plant to survive, getting it to thrive. If you're ready to stop wasting time on plants that disappear every winter and finally build a landscape that gets fuller and more beautiful every year, don't forget to grab your copy of The Plant Once Garden. It's approximately 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, completely organized into one easy-to-use reference guide. Inside you'll find perennial foundations, long-term planting plans, low-maintenance garden systems, and the exact strategies that help create gardens that improve season after season. Simply scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the description or pinned comment below to get your copy. Thank you again for your support. Most people will look at July and think they waited too long. Now you know better. You know that warm soil can become an advantage. You know that some of the toughest, fastest-spreading perennials actually establish extremely well during midsummer when planted correctly. And you know that the plants we covered today aren't just flowers, they're investments. Each one has the potential to return larger next year, and larger again the year after that. Filling bare spaces, supporting pollinators, suppressing weeds, adding structure, adding color, and gradually transforming your landscape into something that feels mature, established, and alive. The best part is that many of them continue doing that work long after you've forgotten planting day ever happened. So before another week slips by, choose one. Maybe it's catmint, maybe it's bee balm, maybe it's coneflower, yarrow, creeping thyme, or black-eyed Susan. Pick the one that fits your garden and get it into the ground. Then come back and tell me which plant you chose and what state or growing zone you're gardening in. I read every comment, and your feedback helps shape future videos on this channel. Thank you so much for watching. This is your garden. This is your season. And July is still full of opportunity. Go plant something.